Hi everyone, welcome to this next session of Pulse. Today we are going to talk about the election manifesto that have come. Today we are doing it as a webinar as well as a conference call. So you know, I would like to thank everyone who's come today to this call. So let's start with talking about what exactly is it that the BJP as well as the Congress are promising us from a perspective of election economy, fiscal deficit, and what could be the ramification for corporate India for whatever these parties have been talking about. So broadly, if you talk about the BJP, the large part of the manifesto, I have the manifesto in front of me, talks about what they have achieved till now in last 5 years and little bit more information about what they intend to do going forward. The main hits, if you talk to me about in the manifesto, would be the focus on infrastructure, where they are talking about investing close to 100 lakh crores, around 1.5 trillion dollars into the infrastructure side. Now, if you look at the maths, currently we are spending close to around 10 lakh crores on the infra side. If what BJP is saying over next 5 years, we have to ramp it up to close to around 20 lakh crores of investment, which is a significant increase in terms of overall investment. In terms of things like demonetization, the manifesto only at one point only talks about that. Other than that, there is not too much of mention of demonetization. The BJP has talked about reduction of taxes for us, the middle class. However, there are no specific numbers per se on that. Interestingly, they are talked about agriculture warehouse, which could be something quite an interesting thing to for the farmers, from a perspective of over next 4 to 5 years, because in India, a large amount of agriculture produce gets wasted because of not having proper logistics for that. They've been talking about more associations to get more farm produce directly, especially in metro cities, to the consumer directly rather than through the normal APMC route, which is there. They are talking about having an insurance for small traders. They are talking about giving pensions to them. So that is one particular side, the small trader side, which obviously the BJP is very strong in. So that is something that clearly they find that they should be focusing on in terms of this particular election. Other than that, the manifesto, on the security side, and on the internal security, they continue to talk about Article 370, section, the policies, whatever BJP has with regard to Kashmir, the citizen bill for Northeast, the normal thing that we had expected in the manifesto are there. Per se, in terms of specifics, they are not too much that is there, except for data about what all has been achieved by the party. If you look at the Congress manifesto, so obviously, something Nyuntam I is the critical thing which everyone is talking of in the Congress manifesto, where they talked about that 5 crore households will get close to around 72,000 rupees. So the expenditure of that would be around 3.6 lakh crore. The other thing with the Congress manifesto is that there are significant amount of expenditure that they have talked about, whether to do with the reduction per se in the amount of taxation, getting a single rate for GST, you know, and if you talk about the schemes, then spending a lot of money on the healthcare, education, those kind of social welfare schemes. One important thing on the insurance side is that they have talked about a significant change in the Ayushman scheme, which has been one of the most successful schemes. And they are talking about that they will not allow insurance companies to make any money on crop protection from farmers, which could be kind of a negative for the general insurance companies in case Congress does come back to power. So that is one negative for them. They're also talking about DBT, direct tax code for income tax. So if you look at from a numbers perspective, currently we have a fiscal deficit of close to around 3.4%. And if I add up the deficit of the states, we end up with a deficit of close to around 6.6%. So you add around 3.2% of these states. Overall, if you look at all the Congress schemes, they could lead to a fiscal deficit number of close to around 10%, which obviously is not viable at all. So the problem with the manifesto is that it's not talking too much in terms of how more revenue will get generated, how money will come for this kind of investment that they've been talking about, especially on the agriculture side, on social security side. So those are the kind of questions that one has after looking at the documents. In all, if you ask me, from a capital market perspective, which is a manifesto which is better for investors, I would say that the BJP manifesto is obviously better relative to the Congress manifesto because there is a lot of expenditure increase, especially on the social side, which could put a lot of pressure on the fiscal of the country. In case going forward, they do, look at getting more revenue from somewhere, then situation might change, or they are more slow in terms of getting these things done. For example, they are talked about giving around whoever whatever vacancies are there in terms of government jobs, providing all filling up all those vacancies. Now the expenditure of that could be more than 70,000 crores. So that is a additional burden that would be there on the fiscal. So broadly speaking, 65% of the manifesto per se of both the parties, whether we talk about green energy or whether you talk about smart cities, most of the things are on a very similar kind of a line. However, we do see a difference in terms of approach, especially in terms of social security schemes. On taxation, there is a difference, especially with regard to GST. On insurance, as we discussed, with regard to crop insurance, there is a difference. So some of the differences that we could clearly see. I think so. The most important thing out of coming of both of them is that Nyuntam I, if it does become something resonating with the people, though there's hardly any time left, that could be the only thing coming out of these manifestos, which could swing some amount of votes from the BJP to Congress. Otherwise, if you look at the overall manifesto, there are not too many things which are very different in terms of the approach of both the parties. Now, what we do is we'll start with a Q&A. We will be happy to take queries related to the economy as well as queries related to this manifesto. And after we take the queries on the call, we will then answer some of the questions which have been asked in the webinar on YouTube. Yeah. Moderator, we can begin with the Q&A.
So the first question is from number 8046585997. Please go ahead.
Please ask your question, please. Yeah, please ask your question, please. So I think the one clear trigger for the market is that earnings are likely to come back. And in case of banks, we see that earning this year would come up by at least 50%, which is a very big number. So that should be one key trigger that earnings recovery will happen this particular year. Mind you, the only thing that could be a negative that one might feel happening this year could be if the monsoons are pretty bad and we see that the crude price go up beyond 85 or dollars. That kind of a scenario could be bad per se. Other than that, I think so. It's more the corporate India, which is the clear thing, in terms of the earnings which will come. So irrespective of who comes. So right now, if you look at the premiums, assuming that the market moves 7-8% up and down because of what happens on the election. Post that, whatever level we reach after a new government gets formed, the important thing would be how the earnings come. And from that perspective, we are confident that from next 1 year perspective, things are not as bad and not everything is dependent on this particular election. So earnings, it is banks all the way, which is the first one most important, and second would be the infrastructure side, where we do see companies like Larsen and Toubro, which are expected to show significant amount of traction in terms of order book. Those kind of companies and those sectors, basically sectors which are more focused on credit demand, those are the kind of sectors which should do well, because we see going forward structurally the cost of capital coming down, and for that reason we see these sectors to do well.
Okay, thank you. Sir, there are no other questions, sir. I will answer one. Dear participants, if you have any questions, please press star and one on your telephone. I repeat, if you have any questions, please press star and one on your telephone keypad. The next question is from 8210830 Please go ahead. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to inquire about HEG and Graphite India. Like, what are the future prospects of these companies? Because already they have done a lot of correction in the market. Right now, available at 50% discount. So I want to invest in this.
So I don't think so. Your thought that they are available at a 50% discount is correct, because it is more like, they had run up a lot from the bottom. They are still up for at least 8-9x, right? In a very short duration of time. So it is not that they are available at a 50% discount. I think so. It's more to do with what kind of dividend they announce. We already see with one of the companies, they've done some investment in their group company, which is into power space. So those things will matter a lot, since prices will not go up to the level they were earlier. It becomes more of a play that how the dividend will increase. If they look at increasing capacities and spend more money on that, structurally, I think so these stocks may not do that well going forward. So I think so. Watch out for the dividend policy and then take a call on whether you want to invest in these stocks. Because other than dividend, I don't see that the pricing per se is likely to go back to the previous levels, and that being the reason for you to invest in these stocks.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
And what about DHF?
So DHFL, I think so. The issue is more in terms of, we need to see at least 2 quarters of how their books are, especially on the loan side, because they have a decent amount of exposure on the real estate side. And real estate as such, the sector is facing a lot of issues. And NBFCs are facing a lot of challenges in terms of their real estate portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So the next question is from 0
Yeah. Please ask your question. Yeah. So mid cap, the reason mid caps have not done that well over last year or so is clearly because a lot of companies were not doing well in terms of growth. And the second reason was that there was an issue in terms of liquidity. Now what's happened is, these mid caps have corrected a lot relative to the large cap index. Are they very undervalued? The answer to that is clearly no. They still are, reasonably valued. Some of them might be undervalued, but large part of them are reasonably valued. So now the question is, the mid caps which will show growth, they will tend to do well relative to other stocks. So I don't think so. You should have a basket approach of investing in all mid cap because it might not lead you anywhere. Okay. So be specific in terms of which particular stock that you invest in terms of mid caps. Like for example, right now maybe something is good could be happening on the chemical side. So, for example, Naveen Fluorine is one of the stocks that we are liking because what you've seen is that the raw material prices are coming down. There's a decent amount of visibility in terms of numbers happening. So those kind of specific stories one need to look at and then focus on investing on rather than putting all the stocks with the same paint of brush. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next question is from 909056. Yeah, hello sir. I'm your Vinod Chandai. Actually, my question is we have a big event, election outcome, and secondly, is at present China is on slowdown and Europe is also slowdown, and USA also slowed down. That's why we are getting FI continuously pumping into Indian market. Is there any sign that US market will go for recession? That bond yield is showing 12 years high. Do you have any idea regarding this?
So first of all, I think so you should not do too much of analysis because at some point of time someone or the other will always be not doing well. Okay. Sometimes Europe will not do well, sometimes Japan will have issues, sometimes China will have issues, sometimes US, sometimes us internally, right? So let's focus on what's happening structurally in terms of our economy and how things are changing. So the main fact is that with the US Federal Reserve saying that they do feel that growth will be a challenge, they will not increase interest rates. As a result of that, there is a risk on rally. Because of that, there is flows which are coming into emerging markets like India, right? Are things in US economy very bad? The answer to that question is no. Most of the IT companies are talking about decent amount of contracts. When they are rebidding for most of their contracts and renewals and all are happening at a very steady pace. So things look quite good. With regard to China, yes, there are issues in terms of growth in China, but that also sometimes benefits us because if they are growth related to some of their some of them shutting their plants because of pollution. So we find that a lot of API manufacturer, chemical companies, they benefit a lot in India. Paper companies are doing well in India. So it is kind of a mixed bag story always. So we should not feel that because China is down, so that's why we should sell all our portfolios. So broadly speaking, from a global economy perspective, things look decent to us. There's nothing which is very negative. Had the interest rates in US gone up a lot, then the yield difference would have gone up, and then you could have seen substantial amount of more FI money going out, which trend clearly now we are seeing happening on the reverse side. So as such, we are not that negative from a global perspective in terms of flows into the Indian markets.
Okay, sir. Understood. Your answer is really good. Sounds good. And only thing, my last question is, should we keep some full whatever investment we have done will be continuing or will it go?
We should continue, but we should always have some amount of. So I don't know your percentage of allocation and how long you have invested, but typically between 20% to 40% amount cash should be there in the portfolio in case that in the election post-election result we see that market does crack and we get a lot of stocks at mouth-watering valuations. Then I think so we should all make a bucket list today or which are the stocks that we like and what price we like. And when we see those prices after the election, assuming that the verdict is not appreciated by the market, at that particular point of time, it would make sense to go and buy those stocks in a systematic manner.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. What? Sure. Now we'll go to the question that we have got from the webinar side. So Sakshi will just ask the questions which have been written by most by the people who have joined this, and then we'll try to answer most of them as much as possible. Would request you not to ask too much of short-term stock related questions. If you have questions related to industry, economy, elections, we'll be happy to take those.
So the first question comes from Rajendra Singh. He wants to know if there is a coalition between the government, either with BJP or with Congress, what will be the market impact?
Right. So, let's look at first of all, what is it that there's a difference in terms of the thought process. So, if you look at this manifesto of, the BJP and of the Congress, which is Congress will deliver, what are they talking about? The difference in approach is that the Congress is talking more about socialism. Congress is talking about more equality, especially because they want to come back to power, so that's why they want to dole out more to people. Whereas in case of BJP, since it's in power, it is looking at adding on to the work that they've already done. In terms of election, what will be the result of that if Modi doesn't come? Then they could be, so it's obviously most of us would agree that there's not even a 1%, not even a 5% chance that there will be a Congress only government, right? It has to be either a BJP government, a BJP led coalition, or it could be a Congress led coalition, or a Congress supported coalition, or a BJP supported coalition, right? So those are the kind of possibilities that one is working on. So if it is a government which is either a BJP government with a clear majority, or with NDA with a clear majority, I see it's obviously to be a positive for the market, because whatever things have been started, they will continue. If it is a coalition government, I don't think that the market might come down a bit because the BJP didn't come to power. But would it structurally change the India growth story over next 3 to 4 years? In our opinion, that is not the case. We've discussed it earlier in some of our Pulse interactions. Whether you look earlier in terms of governments, like for example, the Narasimha Rao government, if you recall, was a coalition government. The Vajpayee government was a coalition government. In case of Manmohan Singh, also they had support from CPM. So most of these governments which are formed later on, they tend to behave in a different manner relative to what their stated objectives in their manifestos are. So you should not worry about most of the things. Yes, on the periphery, like for example, in case of BJP, uh, FDI in multi-brand retail is not happened because of the party was opposed to it, right? They didn't do too much in terms of divestment, in terms of changing the ownership of companies. So those kind of differences would be there. Other than that, I think so structurally, the way things are happening, they will continue. In terms of the social security side, where Congress has talked about a lot of things to be given, I think so they can always work around by shutting 4 of the schemes that BJP had started or worked on, and then give the same money to someone else, under their scheme. So, though from a mathematical perspective, the fiscal deficit of state plus center plus whatever Congress is talking about may go to 9 to 10%, but on a practical basis, that will not happen, because clearly they will find some schemes here and there which they will talk about being ineffective and move money from there. There. In fact, that is what we found in case of the BJP government also, that whatever money has been given to farmers, it's not that there is a substantial amount of money which has been added to schemes like Manrega and all. But obviously, like for example, if Congress come back, so in Manrega they are talking about increasing the number of days from 100 to 150. So those kind of changes and those kind of incremental allocations for sure will happen. So let's not be worried about the long-term portfolios, but yes, from a ability to get stocks at lower price, one can look at keeping some amount of money, cash with you before the election results.
Okay, so what is your view on the auto sector before the election and after the election?
So typically during the auto elections, it is felt that auto sector will do better because there will be more movement of people and goods in elections. This time, after a long period, we've seen auto sector not doing well. Clearly, the two-wheeler industry is going through a bad patch, even on the commercial vehicle side, since the freight rates are low. Despite people expecting pre-buying to happen before the change of norms to BS6 happening next year, we are seeing sluggishness in terms of demand for automobile sector. In terms of does one needs to be overweight on the sector? So answer to that is no. One should wait for the right price. So something like a Maruti, if you are able to get at a price of 6,000, would be one of your best buys for your life. So let's wait for the right price for these stocks. Ashok Leyland, if you can get at a price of say 70 to 75 range, today it must be around 92 odd. So if you're getting those stocks at that particular price points because of elections, those could be a good price to buy these stocks, because clearly on the volume side there are challenges with the sector, with uh, slowdown happening in terms of demand. In case of two wheelers, as we all know that there's been an increase in terms of insurance. There's a further increase likely because of ABS requirements and some other changes which are happening because of BS norms. So from that perspective, I think so one should be not too aggressive in the automobile sector. Thanks.
GN Narayan wants to know which sector is particularly vulnerable if there is a change in government.
So when there's a change in government, point is that who comes first of all. So are we saying something like a left comes, then would there be a big change? Yes, there would be a big change. Would someone like comes, would there be a big change? Yes, that will could happen. So I don't think so. We are still, the jury is out about who exactly will form the government for sure. 100%. So obviously, seeing the BJP clearly has an edge, at least for a simple majority, and if not a simple majority, at least going using the NDA. But in case that doesn't happen, I think the sector which should be most vulnerable are those which are getting a lot of benefits, deemed benefit that people feel, it may be true, it may not be true. One cannot comment on those things. So, for example, as the opposition party alleges, maybe they could be that, the Adani Group stocks may come down a bit for some point of time, because people might feel that, that group is closer to BJP. So those kind of small tidbits, which typical things which media talks about, those kind of stocks could move up and down because of what happens in elections. Other than that, I think so structurally, once if market does come down, I think so it will be more of a homogeneous kind of uh, correction, where you could get a lot of good stocks for decent price. And if the earnings of those stocks continue to be robust, trust me, it doesn't matter who's in power, and those stocks will come back to where they were. Clearly, because at the end of the day, it is the multiple and the earning growth which people value stocks on.
So what do you think will be the impact of election on shipping industry?
So, shipping industry, I think so. It's more of an international industry. It is not related to the Indian election per se. The Baltic Index, how the movement happens on that, international crude. Those are the things which matter. There's a little bit of from a perspective that inward transport, most of using of rivers. BJP has done a lot of things on that. So it could be a sentimental negative from that perspective if BJP doesn't come to power. Other than that, I don't see much of an impact on the shipping industry because it's more of a global industry.
What are your views on the banking industry?
So we are very positive on the banking industry because we believe that there'll be a fall in terms of NPS. And for that reason, we feel that banks should do pretty well going forward. In terms of top picks, ICICI, SBI, and Axis continue to be our top picks. And going forward, also, we are very confident about their earnings growth for this next 12 months period. So, with that, I think so we have answered most of the questions which people had asked on the elections. If there's something specific that I can find, in addition that people have asked, I think most of the questions are on similar lines. So someone has asked what to do in a which mutual fund to buy if new party comes. So I think so mutual fund and direct equity as such, there would not be much of a difference. So whatever mutual fund you are continuing to buy, you can add on more position if you see that the NAV of the fund has come down, and keep on doing an SIP. Don't change your SIP investments. Try to time that, I will stop my SIP before the election and then restart it after a new government is formed. That is not the right way of doing an SIP. So please continue with these SIPs. Coalition governments, people have asked, that we've already answered. So more or less, I think so. Questions whichever people have asked related to elections, economy, we have answered. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks a lot for this session. We are planning to have a regular session of Pulse going forward as well. Please do keep on sending your feedback about what kind of sessions you want, which we can work on next time. Moderator, you can now close the call.